very good evening to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on time for our COVID-19 Academy panel discussion. I'll take a minute here to test mics of each speaker and the moderator. All the panelists present here, please unmute yourself and say hello.
Hello.
Thank you, sir.
And who are you? If I may ask.
Yeah, I'm Michelle from Sphere India team.
How are you? Yes, you've been calling. Thank you so much. It's worked out perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, Michelle. I'm Mercy from World Vision.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. Vikrant here.
Thank you, Vikrant.
Hi, Michelle. Shivani this side.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hi, Michelle. Fausto here.
Thank you. MK Bindal, sir. All right, we'll begin shortly. Give us a few minutes. Good evening, everyone. We welcome you all to another session of the COVID-19 Academy. The COVID-19 Academy is a joint collaboration between Sphere India, UNICEF, WHO India, and HCL Foundation, which aims to build capacities of frontline workers, volunteers, and outreach workers for COVID-19 response and preparedness. Today, we are holding a session on complaint and feedback mechanism, which is the first of the series on accountability to affected and at-risk populations. Accountability to affected and at-risk populations is an active commitment to use power responsibly by taking account of, giving account to, and being held accountable by the people humanitarian organizations seek to assist. A number of practices are adopted by different stakeholders to establish and promote accountability, which is of prime importance during emergencies. Complaint and feedback mechanism, CFM, affirms that affected communities have right to complain if stakeholders are not abiding by commitments made to them. At the same time, CFM provides a communication channel to communities to voice their suggestions and provide feedback on program interventions. This certainly makes a significant contribution to improve the quality of programs. CSOs have been using CFM practices widely in their programs. In this series of webinars on accountability to affected and at-risk populations, we will explore existing practices in various government and non-government stakeholders, identify gaps and challenges, and recommend appropriate mechanism for stakeholders and their individual as well as collective accountability to affected and at-risk populations in India. The session will focus on civil society practices on complaint and feedback mechanism. For the session today, we have a very esteemed panel with us. I will take a moment here to introduce all our panelists. We have with us Major General MK Bindal, Executive Director, NIDM, Professor Santosh Kumar, NIDM, Mr. Siddharth Sreshtha, UNICEF India, Mr. Fausto De Santis, World Food Programme, Mr. Mihir Bhatt, AIDMI, Ms. Shivani Rana, Change Alliance, Ms. Mercy Satyavati, World Vision India, and Mr. Vikrant Mahajan, Sphere India. I would like to take a few moments to give you a brief introduction about all of our panelists. I will start with Major General MK Bindal, who is presently the Executive Director, National Institute of Disaster Management. He was commissioned into the Corps of Army Air Defense in December 1985. An alumnus of the National Defense Academy, Major General MK Bindal is a graduate of the Defense Services Staff College and has attended the prestigious Higher Command course at the Army War College, besides excelling in all other career courses in the Army. He holds a master's degree in Defense and Strategic Studies, as well as Masters of Philosophy in Defense and Management Studies. During his more than 3 decades of service, he has held important command and staff assignments. Welcome, sir. Next, I would like to introduce Professor Santosh Kumar of National Institute of Disaster Management. Professor Santosh is a disaster risk reduction, policy planning, and capacity development expert with over 25 years of experience in different positions in the development planning and disaster risk reduction sector. With a PhD in economics, he has studied gender and development in IDS Sussex, UK, and has received professional training in disaster risk management from Israel, backed with international work exposure at the World Bank and intergovernmental body of SARC. He has also worked at state levels in different capacities in UP Academy of Administration, Nainital, and RIPA Jaipur. He is an experienced hand in designing, planning, and implementing mitigation and long-term disaster recovery plans and projects. Next, we would like to have with us Mr. Siddharth Shrestha, who is Chief Communication for Development for UNICEF India. He is responsible for the social and behavior change communication portfolio for India, including the 12 state offices. Prior to UNICEF India, he was the Chief of Communications, Advocacy and Partnerships for UNICEF Rwanda and Chair of One UN Communications Group. He has worked over a decade in the African continents from West Central to East Africa, all in the field of communications, policy, partnerships, and social change. His experience in the Pacific Islands, Bangladesh, and Nepal, coupled with Africa, provides an in-depth understanding of communications needs in the developing world for the last 2 decades, working with UNICEF, FHI, PSI, GTC, to name a few. He was one of the co-authors of Essentials for Excellence, E4E, researching, monitoring, and evaluating strategic communication for behavior and social change, which was used as an important resource during the avian flu pandemic. He has completed various leadership management courses, including dynamic leadership from Harvard University and INSEAD Business School. Welcome, sir. Our next panelist is Mr. Fausto Arya DeSantis. Mr. Fausto works as the Regional Protection Advisor for World Food Programme, covering Asia and the Pacific. Prior to this role, he worked on protection and accountability to affected populations with World Food Programme's office in Afghanistan and the regional office covering the Syria crisis, and with both national and international NGOs in Afghanistan, India, Nigeria, and Yemen. Mr. Fausto holds a BA in philosophy, a PG diploma in peace and conflict studies, and an MA in international law. Welcome, sir. Next, we have with us Mr. Mihir Bhatt, Director, AIDMI. Mr. Mihir leads All India Disaster Mitigation Institute and is one of the earliest proponents of sphere standards in India. He has reviewed and evaluated accountability to disaster-affected people since the Gujarat earthquake in 2001, including management of complaints in humanitarian action from urban resilience, local governance, sustainable agriculture, child protection, and gender equality point of view. Currently, he is working on locating accountability in the pandemic landscape. Welcome, sir. We also have with us Ms. Shivani Rana, Emergency Program Officer, South Asia Change Alliance, a direct subsidiary of Christian Aid in India. Ms. Shivani is a humanitarian professional and has been working in the sector of emergency response, climate change, disaster risk reduction, disaster recovery, and resilient programs from last 10 years. She holds a postgraduate degree in disaster management and has worked closely with government authorities and national and international civil society organizations and in India and in the South Asia region, having a close experience of managing the Rohingya refugee response project of Christian Aid in Bangladesh. She is also acting as Asia Platform Coordinator for Asia Interagency Surge Platform, comprising of 6 international agencies for managing interagency surge deployments during humanitarian response and recovery programs across Asia. Welcome, ma'am. Next, we would like to welcome Ms. Mercy Satyavati from World Vision India. Ms. Mercy has been working in World Vision India for the last 3 decades, having started her career as an analyst in World Vision way back in October 1990. Today, she manages 2 projects, Education for Life in 14 schools and SM Nagar Development Project in Chennai, and is a member of the National Disaster Management Team of World Vision India from 2015. She was the accountability point person for South India flood response in 2015 and 16 and is trained in accountability and practicing accountability in all their programs. Welcome, ma'am. Finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Vikrant Mahajan, CEO Sphere India. Vikrant has over 24 years of professional experience working at interagency policy level and frontline humanitarian action with government, UN, corporations, CSOs, and armed forces in diverse contexts. He has led interagency coordination for more than 100 disasters and represents on governance and policy level committees of several international organizations. He currently works as CEO of Sphere India. With that, we finish the round of introductions of our esteemed panelists, and I would now like to hand this over to Vikrant to please go ahead and facilitate this session. Thank you, Vikrant.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for hosting and this introduction. I think Michelle has already set the stage in terms of the context that this session is a part of a series on accountability to affected populations or at the at-risk populations. I think accountability is at the core of the humanitarian action, and especially with the institutions like Sphere and other quality and accountability initiatives we see the world over. But we also see a lot of good practice locally developed within the other different stakeholders, and a lot of it also exists within the government mechanisms to say this. What we collectively, while learn from each other as different stakeholders involved in the humanitarian action, but also picking up the good practices from the region and other country experiences. I think Sphere, in collaboration with NIDM, NDMA, and our other collaboration, the UNICEF, World Health Organization, World Food Program, and the HCL Foundation, we are exploring it now that as part of our core work, that what could be our recommendations in putting together an accountability framework for India, where we can see as its components as the stakeholders individually as entities can hold themselves accountable, but at the same time we can collectively be accountable to the very people we seek to assist in crisis. So within this, when we explore it stakeholder wise, I think we will definitely come to look at the practices within other stakeholder groups. I've been interestingly follow it out that some very good interesting practices also exist in the corporate management circle also. And while recently I think the Honorable Prime Minister has also started an initiative toward the grievance redressal, I think we will explore about these in the future session. We thought to begin with the first session, we will focus on the civil society good practices. So what are the civil society good practices? And one among many, I think one of the core to it in the civil society good practices is the complaint and feedback mechanism, which also correspond to some of the accountability standards. So what in the complaint and feedback mechanism has been our experience is something which we will try to explore from the perspectives of a different a very experienced speakers today we have with us. And also, I think we got a very good set of interesting participants over here. And through this deliberation, we'll move it forward. I think before I go ahead, I will request Major General M.K. Bindal, the Executive Director from the NIDM, to kindly give us an inaugural keynote address and take us some of these key aspects through his lens and his experiences. I welcome Major General M.K. Bindal. Over to you, sir. We look forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Vikrant. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I congratulate Sphere India and NIDM in collaborating to hold this important webinar on accountability to affected at-risk population, because the past few events has shown how everyone, right from the rights holder to the rights bearer to the people who want the privileges or who are the needy, that it is all interlinked together and everyone has a role to play in this hierarchical system. So the health cluster which I am focusing on today is it aims to ensure that a people-centered approach is there to achieve better health outcomes, improve accountability by placing the affected population at the center of decision making and at the center of action to promote meaningful access. So it's very important that the affected population should be the ones who should be always forming part of any discussions. This approach ensures awareness of the different needs and capacities of the various vulnerability groups in the affected population, that is the women, girls, boys, men of all ages, people with disabilities, and other diverse characteristics that we keep seeing. So this particular awareness, it informs what we do and how we do it and with whom we are supposed to do it. So in 2011, the humanitarian system was reformed, leading to the transformative agenda, which had three main pillars. That was empowered leadership, coordination, and the most important was accountability to affected population. Today we are discussing the third pillar, that is accountability to affected population, what, why, and how. So to support this particular framework, transformative agenda, an operational framework for accountability to affected population was developed by the Interagency Standing Committee, IASC, to assist the implementing agencies both individually and in groups to find any practical entry points for improving accountability to the affected population. In 2011, this IASC principles acknowledged the fundamental importance of accountability to the affected population. And then they endorsed 5 commitments which should be at the core of any emerging policy and practice relating to accountability to the affected population. First was leadership and governance. That was basically to demonstrate the commitment to accountability by ensuring feedback, accountability mechanisms. They are all integrated into the various strategies, program proposals, monitoring and evaluation frameworks, recruitment, staff inductions, trainings, performance management, partnership arrangements, and they are highlighted in each and every reporting. The second issue they talked about was transparency, which was to provide accessible and timely information to the affected populations on organizational procedures, structures, processes that affect the people. And then they ensure that they can make informed decision and choices, and it is not thrust down on them by the paper pushers, if any, and facilitate a dialogue between an organization and its affected population over information provision. The third pillar that was emphasized on was feedback and complaints. Without active feedback and complaint and taking that feedback in a positive way and not punishing or subjecting that person who has given a feedback to any sort of harassment, leads to a very pragmatic and a practical solution which will be readily acceptable by the affected population and will also ensure greater accountability. Uh, Participation, again, the affected population must make an active role, must play an active role in the decision making, and for that it has to be a participatory process. It has to be, they have to be brought onto the talking table, they have to be given a seat at the table during every stage of policy planning and implementation. And finally, they should be involved again in, I covered it a little bit in the previous topic, the previous pillar, design, monitoring, and evaluation. So designing, monitoring, and evaluating the goals and objectives of the programs should be done with the involvement of affected population so that the learning is fed back into the organization and mid-course corrections are done to suit the requirement of the affected population in the correct way. So working to implement on these commitments can be very challenging because the humanitarian access is limited or sometimes absent also. For example, communication and information flow can be intermittent and difficulties can emerge in ensuring participation or representations. Basic elements of an, which are the basic elements of an accountable response. So in environments with very high security restrictions, in some countries like Somalia, Afghanistan, Sudan, where traditional methodologies might not be applicable, where UN agencies have been applying different approaches to engage with the people, they seek to assist, it's a challenging task. Many a times it has been seen that remote management and technology-based solutions are becoming increasingly common approaches through which better accountability to communities affected by disasters and conflict can be achieved. So although crisis might strain or even shatter traditional social structure in this whole uh, accountability issues, but communities have their own coping mechanisms. And for example, they have been noted to recreate links and connections through which information is shared and collected. So an understanding of the existing or the new structures, the traditional ways I'm talking about, will help the agencies across the board to collect and exchange information. So examples of the local structures that might be considered includes, most importantly, the community-based organizations, the civil society organizations and groups, media groups, and even the diaspora, which is maintaining links with local community. Now, these are the people who are more often than left out in all policy uh, interventions, and there is a need that these organizations should be brought on board at the earliest, consulted, and their experience is taken into account while making any policy intervention, and they are to be treated more as a collaborator and not as a competitor. So with this introductory remarks, I will settle down here because Vikrant has got a number of questions to ask, and I'm sure we will be covering the whole topic in a bigger way. However, uh, I've again welcome all the participants who have joined today on this important topic, and I hope to learn a lot from this program. Thank you. Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you very much, sir. I think you very aptly set the framework behind the accountability to affected population and some of the good things, good practices, references emerging in the global context, right from Intelligence Standing Committee to the other developments which have happened with the standards and as well. Thanks, sir. I think it's really endearing to hear all this thing from you. I think I'll move quickly to our next speaker. Is Mr. Siddharth Shrestha. Again, as we heard in the introduction, Siddharth comes from a very varied experience across the world. But very recently, with Siddharth and the government of Kerala, we tried to work on an initiative which came to be known as a JPPI, that is Jankiye Pangalitam is and rephrasing it in colloquial English, it's about the communication with the communities and listening to the communities. The experience was unique. That it was the first time probably a government in all over the world who has tried to institutionalize a practice like this. So Siddharth, from your the experience of this and other experiences probably, what have been the key learning, key takeaway from this? And based on that, what's your recommendation for COVID and other disasters to the stakeholders? Over to you, Siddharth.
Thanks, Vikrant, and thanks, Ms. General Bindal, for also setting the stage. Vikrant already started off with, so I would just like to pause here and talk a little bit about the background, because maybe not all the participants know why did we do the accountability to affected population, right? So it happened in 2018. To keep the story short, yes, it is perhaps in terms of the size, it was one of the unique ones in terms of the state government taking the lead instead of just the civil society organizations taking the lead. Not to say that it was done in both silos. All it was, I think, the power of partnerships. In the case of Kerala, it happened during the 2018 floods. If you see other initiatives for accountability to affected population, it's mainly led by CSOs. The big one is our neighbor in Cox's Bazar. There is a huge accountability to affected population mechanism systems in place. Again, but more from a CSO led than a government led. So in Kerala, we did this together with all partners, including Spear, and it was led by the state government of Kerala. And one thing really good there was that there were already systems in place. For instance, in Kerala in the early 90s, they already had a decentralized approach. They had already tried a decentralized approach to planning called Janakiya Asutharam. So it was about people's plan. And if you go down to history, you will see that the Grama Panchayats in Kerala have huge budgets because they raise revenues by themselves. Now, in terms of the accountability to affected population, Major General already brought about the 5-stage process. I think it's not only about the needs and feedback of the communities being collected, but the feedback being acted upon is the most difficult and is the most key for that. One good lesson learned for us, we had 2 rounds, round 1 and round 2. In round 1, we had a huge sample size of 19,765 respondents in 489 Grama Panchayats. We used 7 out of the 13 districts, the most affected of the floods. And what actually happened is that it was, again, the power of partnerships. There was a huge advisory committee, which was led by the former chief secretary, who has all the knowledge about decentralized planning and also in terms of getting feedback from the population. So round 2 happened just around 2019, late part of 2019. The difference between round 1 and round 2 is, again, there was a lesson learned there, that we decided to bring in the qualitative feedback. I know in terms of feedback mechanisms, for at least if you ask me, definitely just by doing quantitative, it's not enough, because to find why, the why is not possible just by collecting quantitative information. It is absolutely important to have qualitative information. So that was in round 2. There was already a lesson learned there. The other big ones, I think, what we tried to do and what we are still in the process of doing is that there was a huge advocacy, not just by, I'm saying, on behalf of UNICEF, but on behalf of all the development partners. SPEAR, there was other UN agencies, all the other partners did this advocacy with the state government to embed the findings into the Grama Panchayat plans. So what has happened now, just recently, earlier in January 2020, pre-COVID times, I should say, there has been a clear decision to develop community-based disaster management plans for all Grama Panchayats. I think I would not attribute or contribute it to just the AAP, what we started in Kerala, but not a full attribution, but definitely a huge contribution to making that effort. The other one is the awareness of people in giving the voices so that the voices can be acted upon. Other lessons learned, the other one is, of course, there is still a long way to go when we talk about the GRM. Community feedback mechanisms are easy, but when we go into the details of grievance redressal mechanisms are difficult, and we are still learning there to look at. In terms of moving on to COVID, the lessons we have learned and what we have applied even in Kerala itself is there was a huge capacity which was built along Kudumsri, because the AAP system was housed institutionalized under Kudumsri, and a lot of people might have heard about Kudumsri, which is a part of the poverty elevation program made of almost 4.3 million women workers, right? And we had already built capacity of a number of them, including the 1,000 community resource persons in interpersonal communication. They have been utilized extensively in the COVID response, as well as one more innovation I wanted to end with is, in Kerala, in May, they had something called the Ashriya scheme. The Ashriya scheme was providing psychosocial support and essential guidance to the elderly population. And the relation between the elderly population and COVID-19, right? They have not been able to access services. And what they did was basically using telephone calls, getting feedback and complaints, as well as requests from the elderly population, what kind of services they needed. So there was a lot of feedback and requests coming, particularly in terms of medical support, medicine support, links to hospitals, links to referrals. It was all part of AAP, and because of this process, I guess the Ashia scheme was much more, came into action much more easier. Moving forward, I think I will come to the community feedback mechanism a little later, because we should be giving time for other participants. So over to you, Vikrant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sid. I think that's really set the stage going. I think Kerala was one unique experience of government led, but I think it's along with the other partners where we see it. And perhaps I think one of the objectives of this series on accountability is that we see more such examples in other places and other states where we have government and non-government actors together working on a common accountability framework. To help us through that, I think we have our next, again, a very experienced speaker is Mr. Behir Bhatt. And as he shared, his introduction says that he's working these days to analyze accountability in the COVID context. Mihir Bhai, for you, as I also see, have been very closely working in some of the recent disasters with some very key NGOs to study and document their accountability mechanism, especially with regard to complaint and feedbacks. So, in your experience, what are some of the common complaints or feedbacks we hear from communities, from the people, and how do you think these can be used by the government and non-government actors? So over to you, Mihir.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Mihir Bhatt, and Vikrant Bhai, thank you for inviting us to this panel, which is very important. And my respect to Bindal sir and NIDM team, and of course the WHO and UNICEF who was participant in organizing this. What I was planning to do is to talk about complaint mechanism and talk about a view that I have formed based on the following. What I have done is recently we were asked to invited to look at what is happening in terms of a rapid review as far as pandemic is concerned. And the review was looking at who needs what. And that was national, looking at all the parts of India. And roughly 53 key stakeholders were interviewed to find out who needs what, which included UN, which included Government of India officials, state government, district level, civil society organizations, INGOs, international NGOs, some networks, local organizations. And from that, I have gone back to that date. This was done during June and July 2020, this year. And from that, I have taken out 5 or 6 elements which are related to complaint, and therefore the nature of complaint mechanism that we may need. So what are the things that people are complaining about? And from the long list, it's a long list. We like to complain a lot as Indians, and why not? And from that, I have picked up 6 or 7 sort of cluster areas where if there is a complaint mechanism for not only COVID, but any disaster risk, any crisis risk, what would it contain or what should it cover in India? I must say I'm thankful to 2 groups. One is a group which is Christian Aid, Save the Children, Islamic Relief, and Caritas, which had asked us to look at the accountability to affected population in 3 states of India, Assam, and of course Kerala and Orissa. And the work that I'm presenting builds on that very excellent work that these agencies and the partners had done. Of course, there were difficulties, but that's the work that I am building on. And also World Vision had asked us to look at the accountability to affected child population and what happened to them as far as accountability was concerned. So I'm building that on that piece of work as well. And the last, as Shrestha Saab just mentioned about UNICEF, we had also looked at 5,000 families across Kerala and to see what was the nature of their voices regarding health and livelihood, evacuation, and recovery. So I'm building on that part as well. So this is the background from which COVID and non-COVID that I am taking out 6 or 7 areas, which will be very important to develop the accountability mechanism. And some of these parts may be a bit critical, but we shouldn't take that in that spirit. We should just see what are the kind of things that people need as far as COVID and non-COVID related disasters are concerned. So first and most importantly, I'd like to start with the group of questions that came out from people we interviewed, key stakeholders, were related to social protection. And Shrestha sir just mentioned right now that the children were very important, and all the items related to child protection has been raised time and again as far as social protection is concerned. Complaints related to that would be very good to capture. About women and violence would be very good to capture. Income, paid income, unpaid income, deferred income, income which was taken away from that as part of social protection, that would be good to look at. And also what the feedback so far says, that overall social protection measures that we have, national measures and state measures, there is a variation which is uneven, but also the system is weak when the major shock, such as COVID-19 or flood or drought comes. It is also underdeveloped in a sense that where there is a system, it is not developed enough and therefore cannot perform as best as we would like it to perform. And third, that what has actually worked and worked quite well in COVID situation, almost throughout, not entirely, is cash-based assistance. And there were not complaints but suggestions about how to improve upon the whole cash-based assistance that was provided. So that's one area, social protection. The second area that is coming out very clearly are complaints related how we are communicating risk. And this is the communication in terms of early warning from the state government to another state government, national government to local government, one city to another city. But also there are complaints related to the timeline of the risk information communication, about the accuracy that was not quite there in terms of information to be trusted, that can we actually trust that such and such train will come and take us back to our home, for example. And also it was quite widely scattered. And this particular group of risk communication aspect has also come up as a complaint part in another group discussion, which was organized some time ago by Duryog Nivaran in governance and COVID. So this is very much part of the risk governance related issues and complaints. The third part, a group that is coming out, are complaints related to migrants and displaced workers. And this is not a surprise at all. And a lot of work ILO has done on that, and UN Women has done on that, about how, what is the nature of the need and how to deal with that. So I'm not going into too much detail in terms of rural, urban, at home, at work population. But I would like to mention that these complaints are related to, some of them are in relation to refugees, internal migrants, external migrants as well. And there is a large number which comes across the border from neighboring countries, goes across the border to the neighboring countries, loss of jobs related complaints, unpaid dues, that money was due to them and that money was not paid and they had to go back home empty hand, empty pocket. And also the delay in returning to their home, though they may have lived in one particular city for 10 years, but they were migrants and therefore they had to go back home to their own village, may it be Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, etc. The next group, and there are two more, the next group is related to the complaints related to the business resilience. That's a broad title I have, but under which what is coming is that the devastating impact on the small and medium enterprise, micro enterprise, for example, access to market, for example, contracts were not honored, not given. They had produced things and they were not able to deliver the contract and therefore lost the money and the contract. The piece rates were not being able to be paid. And as we know, 90% of the businesses in India are small and medium enterprise. The child labor within these and what happens to them and what happened to them is a big question that came up as a complaint. And also about agro businesses, FAO and WFP related concerns, that what happened to agro businesses, agro processes, to the farmers, family farmers, female farmers, for example. So a range of complaints related to urban, rural, agricultural, industrial businesses that came up. And we have more details, we can do that into the question answer. The next was very important and very important to us as citizens of India, and that was related to the inclusion and voices of people who were affected. And this mainly grouped around 2 or 3 areas. One was Dalits and the Dalit community, how they did not have enough access, enough inclusion in a series of a list of programs where they didn't have access to. Women, of course, that we know, half of our population, sadly, they were far behind the men having access to this. Also, there were minorities. For example, there were ethnic groups all across the country and their access to and inclusion. There were casual labor, daily wage labor, farm labor, agricultural labor, urban construction labor, for example, tribals in the tribal pockets across roughly 200 districts of India, and family farms, for example, and their inclusion into agriculture-related decision-making. The list is long, but we'll stop at that. And the last one is related to, the last one is the group related to the complaints on human rights and civil liberties, and human rights, which included rights of the farmers, for example, economic rights, political rights, and how they were not able to exercise that, students' right to education and how that was affected due to the pandemic, for example, and civil liberties. So basically, the human rights and civil liberties were, the complaints were about civic space, were about recognition, were about rights of migrant workers, as I said before. And so that was the nature of rights, complaints related to human rights and civil liberties. There were also complaints related to the medical practice and treatment by the doctors, hospitals, ICUs, medical suppliers supplied wrong things, fictitious things, didn't supply at all after the money. There were complaints related to pandemic and other crisis overlap. That is the pandemic, COVID-19, and Ampher cyclone, Nisarga cyclone, for example, ongoing floods, and pandemic. So when two crises collide, how do you complain, for what, a part of the complaint to which responding authority? One was health and another was flood, for example. So that kind of confusion, and how do you respond to that? And then there were complaints related to the recovery. And that's the last one, that how the recovery process is being unfolded, and how these individuals and their businesses will become engines of economic growth. That was not clear. Which are the sectors where actually money will go? A lot of financial package government of India, state governments have offered, are well received, but the performance of package is not quite known, as well as it assumed that there is economic conditions around for a small business to have access to finance, use that finance to do well. But when the economy itself is not doing well, they are very reluctant or don't take up the financial package at all. So those are the nature of complaints. I'm not saying all, but there are complaints related to that. Also lockdown, unlocking 1, 2, and 3 stages, etc. So those are the 7, 8 areas around which the complaints are there, which any mechanism that is set up as and when would be looking into far more carefully than the usual complaints that we have about corruption, about non-performance, about health, about casual leave, for example, etc., etc. So these are the 6 or 7 contemporary current areas where the COVID type, pandemic type of crisis and non-pandemic crisis for both we need to address when a complaint mechanism is actually designed. I'd like to stop with that. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And any questions related to that, you can list on the question and answer bar, and we'll address that. Thank you, Vikrant Bhai.
Thank you so much, Mihir Bhai. I think that's been a very interesting analysis. I think a lot of good learning from that. And I think slightly ahead, our next speaker, Shivani, again, I think in some of these very, the projects, from where you have picked up this information, she has been at the helm of those. And if I might ask Shivani, in these feedbacks, how do you ensure that everyone in the community understand what is complaint and feedback mechanism, and because there are limitation which comes to people in terms of understanding it, able to read, write, or whether even comprehend the sophisticated communication sometimes we make, and more importantly the issues like maybe disability and other social barriers which could be posing challenges to the access to these very mechanisms. So how do you ensure this inclusiveness in design of these kind of these complaint and feedback mechanism? Over to you, Shivani.
Uh, Thank you, Vikrant, for the question, and rightly pointed out, and also for giving the opportunity to speak in this session very much on the accountability and which is people-centered. And also thanks to participant for joining the session today, and also we would be really interesting to see that what questions comes across. So I would like to go back on the question. First of all, it is really important, rather than we are going in the field and imposing the entire complaint and feedback mechanism on people, and then ask them to, okay, give the feedback, give the complaints and all those other things. But before doing that, it is really important to have a kind of assessment, to have a kind of participatory approach with the community itself, to know from them that how comfortable they are in giving complaint, providing the complaints and feedbacks through different mechanisms we are planning to set up. So that is one. And also it is really important, since you have pointed out on the inclusion perspective, which is really a core of our humanitarian responses, where we say that let's understand the needs of certain communities who are vulnerable, who belongs from certain sections, like as you mentioned, persons with disability, people who are who doesn't know how to read and write. And then also there are some communities who are at the verge of facing the social discrimination. This is again another accessibility challenge sometimes they face, in basically to find themselves as comfortable in providing the feedback, especially in the Indian context. So this is where it's really important to know what are their comforts and how would they like to give a feedback, rather than we say that, okay, I have set up a complaint box there in the village, so you need to provide your feedbacks and complaints there. No, we need to first ask them. So that is the first step. Then moving forward, it is also important to inform community once we'd gone through all those processes, that how they can raise complaints based on various feedbacks and suggestions we receive from the community. So these are the different mechanisms have been set up at your village level. This can be your complaint box, this can be your phone, mobile phone calls. These days we are mesmerized to see, even in the last mile villages, you'll see people are, everyone has a phone. So that is one. And also another aspect is to set up the accountability committees that we always suggest our partners that do that. We should have proper accountability committee, or you say you can also call it as redressal or grievance redressal committees at the village level. So that can be set up where people can have verbal discussions. And also from the gender point of view, it should be properly gender segregated. We should have women members in those committees, so that if there is any sensitive complaint comes, so they can find it very comfortable in approaching the women. A women approaching women is more comfortable, as everybody understands. Another thing is also, that's something we had done in the past. We'd given a choice of sending an email or even writing a letter to the organization directly, because sometimes there are certain complaints and feedbacks which a person would not really be comfortable to directly give it to the project staff. They would rather be would like to send it to the organization. So this is all about that, how they can raise complaints and feedback based on the different mechanism. Now, again, that one of the other thing is also important to inform community that what all kind of suggestion and complaint they can provide. Sometimes a person will say, we receive the complaints and feedbacks, and we usually see a trend that people are just saying thanks. It was really nice. We are really glad. It was really helpful what all response you had given. But again, at the same time, we need to really inform community that what rights they hold in their hand, what kind of suggestions, what kind of complaints they can provide, such as a person who receive a relief kit. When we do the responses, we inform community what all items you will be receiving under a relief kit, right? If you're receiving tarpaulins, is it one piece of tarpaulin, two piece of tarpaulin, like that? So all informations are there. So people can inform us, if by chance something is missing, rather than they feel it like a bit of uncomfortness in saying, okay, how do we send the complaints? At least we got tarpaulin. It's okay if we didn't get soaps. No, but you have to tell us that if the quantity and quality is less, do inform us so that we can respond to that. And then there are other kind of things. If people find out that there is a misuse of resources, there is what kind of transparency and all that we establish at the community level. We have community participation during the beneficiary selection processes. So that all we need to inform communities that this is your right to inform. If you feel that somebody has not been selected appropriately as per the principles of project we are following. And one of the most important thing is also to inform the community members if there is any sensitive complaints about the unacceptable behavior of or the conduct of staff. You should raise your voice. You should raise a complaint and send it through any different mechanism we have sent. So this is really important from the safeguarding part of point of view, because this is where community feel that, okay, I think there is a woman who might be a victim of the all these abuses, but she might feel that, okay, this will not be really appropriate to give a complaint on this. They are doing already a lot of things for us, but that's something we really need to inform community that these are the things you have to raise. You have to raise your hand while you face such things or harassments by our staff or any volunteers. So this is one thing. And second, last is, how do we share? Okay, we have asked communities that you have to raise complaints and feedbacks. These are the different mechanisms we discussed with them. These are the kind of suggestion and complaints you can give. But at the end, we need to see that how are you going to share this information with these people. So this can be done through different mechanisms. We don't say that it can be only done through the accountability or the village level committees we have and through the verbal, but we can adopt a lot of other options. We can have flyers, we can have print banners which talk about all these mechanisms proper way. So I think that is one of the important thing is to really consider. And on that, I would actually like to, I hope I can share my screen here. So I would just like to quickly share a screen to show you one sample. I hope people can see it. So okay, it is being shared. So these are the kind of flyers I'm talking about. This is how you can print it in terms of flyers. You can have banners like this. You can give it in the hand of community members. You can tell them that these are the things like quality, sensitive complaint. It's in English, but usually we always print them in the local language so people can read and write. So these are the kind of flyers we can do. But now I'm coming back to Vikrant's question again is on the inclusion. So what about persons with disability? So in our experiences, phone calls work really well. Then verbal complaints also work really well in our cases. But this is where we really need to communicate. Communication is one of the main part of the entire process. We need to communicate with all these community members. We need to sit with them. You can sit with them separately also and ask them that how are they, what are their preference of submitting a complaint or submitting a feedback to the organization. So this is, so the communication I would say is the center of everything. So you really should have that communication with the communities. And at the same time, I would also say it is not only, it is very important to receive record the complaints and feedbacks, but it will not make any sense if you're not going to track it. As we've been talking about, like, how are you going to close it off? So you need to track it, should give a timely response to certain things, to certain complaints and feedbacks, and close it properly. So that's the whole thing I would like to say on the particular question asked by Vikrant.
Well, thanks, Shwani. It was very elaborate and I think very accurate also. It's all about mobilizing community. It's engaging them, informing them, rather informing them in the manner they understand it better, and it's all about empowering them and ensuring various ways through which we can have inclusion. I think you cover a whole range of things. Thanks for that. I think I'll go to our next speaker. I'll first go to, I think, our colleague from World Food Program, who comes from the region, Mr. Fausto. So Fausto, what's your experience from different countries in the region? What has worked well and what has not worked well, and what learnings we can have it from the regional experiences for India. Over to you, Mr. Fausto.
Thank you, Vikrant. Yes, so I mean, there are a lot of different initiatives taking place across the region, whether they are agency specific or interagency. Now, I thought I'll take a little step back in some of the conversation that my colleagues mentioned, including Major General Bindal on the AAP commitments and all. What's the important in linking it to the CFM? What CFM does a lot of times is bring in the different components of AAP all together. So what we see is that it becomes a channel for communicating to population. It becomes a channel to receiving, that's feedback on complaints from the population to us, but also it becomes a channel for increasing participation, because if your CFM really informs program, then it's able to include people's feedback into the program design and changes. And this element of CFM really combines what AAP commitments are in the different forms. Now, when we talk about agency-specific and interagency, and I'll come to the interagency part in terms of successes, because I was told that's a bit of the interest at the moment, is that DCFM can be in different forms. You know, they can be, whether it's mobile or call center, it can be web-based messaging. I think some people talked about WhatsApp or Facebook or Viber, depending on what tools are used. It can be help desks. It can be your staff going to monitoring fields. It can be suggestion boxes, which are a bit old at the moment in terms of modality, but how feedback is collected can change. And the important thing is that the channel that's used, the modality, is informed by the preferences of the affected population, of the people in that sense we are serving. And that's a key component in building a successful CFM. Now, this often what happens is that we have an agency specific CFM. And you know, different numbers, different contact points, and it can become quite challenging for people to understand who is the, let's say, who's the agency providing assistance on this field or on that sector, whom should I contact, who's an implementing partner of which agency. And there is an increasing effort to try and have a more of an interagency approach to CFM. Now, this can generally mean, that's in a broad spectrum, mean two things. What, in a sense, we can call a common repository and what is known as a common mechanism. A common repository can be, you know, a common analysis that's done by agencies. Can be done, let's say, for example, from a community engagement or a AAP working group, an analysis that looks at the operational environment, that looks at what are the preferred channels of communication of the population to receive or provide information. What's the telecommunication environment? Can we have pre-existing agreements with telecom providers in terms of toll-free numbers? What are the major information needs of the population? And this, let's say, the common analysis element. Another one can be in this section, the common information management software database that looks at who does what, where, when, and with whom, including to support referrals. So, you know, if somebody calls in for knowing where does WFP provide assistance in this specific area, then if this common repository or common agency that's managing repository has that information, they can directly refer them, or they have the information themselves to provide the information. And this common platform can also then be providing us information on wash services or education or dignity kits, and that becomes quite important. The other is common messaging. So, you know, for example, the COVID response has shown that the importance of having a common approach to the kind of messaging that we're doing, because rumors, again, becomes a problematic issue and easily spread. So understanding those rumors, coming back to the analysis element, which can then create common dashboards. You know, who is providing, what kind of information needs were requested this month, by which agency, in which sector. So let's call this the interagency common repository effort. Now, if we take this a step forward, is the common mechanism. So it becomes a repository plus an interagency, let's say maybe call center, an interagency help desk, where not just the information is collected and analyzed, but also calls are received. And you'd have a common, let's say, toll-free number. And this, to which then all the different agencies CFM link in. And this can really ease up and the kind of reach for affected population. To give some examples from the region and worldwide, a colleague earlier had mentioned about AAP in Bangladesh in Cox's Bazar. So that in fact there is a communication for communities working group there, sometimes in other places known as a community engagement working group or AAP working group. That is more of a common repository information management analysis a mechanism, analysis platform, because we don't have a common call center or common common help desk, but rather you have agencies that provide information to this communication with communities working group, which then stores it and then analyzes it, and there's a common dashboard. As it supports common messaging. This is also some of the ongoing conversation, let's say in Myanmar, where having a common mechanism seems to be a complicated matter. Otherwise, for example, there's a very good success story from Afghanistan, which in fact WFP helped set up and provide initial funding, which is an interagency call center. And it's called Awaz. And on the chat box, I'll leave the web address for it, and everybody can see it. It has an online dashboard, which is live on a monthly basis. And this is a toll-free number that is interagency in nature. It's managed by UNOPS, which in a way is a bit of a neutral agency that doesn't really have implementing humanitarian operation activities across. So it's not seen that much as a policing accountability. And I'll come to that in terms of good practices. But you have this online dashboard, which allows donors, humanitarian agencies to understand which region provided, asked for which information, which kind of people, how many male, how many female, what were the key sectors, what was the information asked. And also, because it's a call center, then anyone from across the country can say, okay, I am here, and who's providing assistance here? This is our main needs. We've had, for example, calls coming, let's say, from a newly displaced village because of warfare. And they said, we've moved from here to here. We need food and we need shelter. We don't have anything. And what that happens is that the operator from the call center will then reach out to the food security cluster or agency or the shelter cluster agency and say, there are people here. And then that mobilizes the agency and the cluster to go and assess and then provide assistance. It also becomes very important in terms of PSE element, which is again very correlated to AAP. And in fact, the renewed commitments on AAP include PSE, which is prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse. Because one of the best way to capture and respond to PSA is through CFMs. And a global one is, for example, in Mozambique, after the typhoon that took place, WFP helped set up the interagency mechanism for CFM so that people could have the information they need. And it's still functioning, and it's still under WFP's responsibility. Now, some of the lesson learned and challenges from establishing country-specific or interagency CFM is that, so in the interagency one, sorry, let's focus on that. There has to be an agreement on, by different stakeholders of having a CFM. Of having an interagency one and providing the information this interagency CFM needs to really respond to the questions that people are asking. It also needs to be built in consultation with communities. We don't have to decide a priori what are the channels that we're going to provide the CFM on, where it's going to be, how is it located, which languages it will have. And also engaging with, for example, was mentioned, people with disabilities, people with different forms of disabilities, people with from indigenous population. How do they want the CFM to look like? And this is extremely important from the element of leaving no one behind in terms of the SDGs. How is data kept safe and confidential? What are the access levels that people have on the information and reports that are made, including for PSCA and especially for PSCA? How do we ensure that communities trust the mechanism? And for that, closing the loop of feedback is important. So if we get information and we act upon it, we need to tell people what action we've taken. Do we have or not a forum to discuss AAP and CFM at the interagency collective level and agree on let's say actions that needs to be taken? Should this be managed by a more neutral agency rather than a specific agency that's operational to ensure that cases reported about the agencies are appropriately referred and managed? And it needs to be accessible by all people, like I mentioned before. To come to some of the challenges, I mean, a key one, of course, is sustainable funding, where you often have initial seed fund, but how do you keep it going? And I mean, what we've seen in AAP is that a lot of times this is something that's people driven. So you'll have a person who's keen on making the response more accountable to people, to African population, but rather it needs to be organizational based.
In between, Costa, I think it's been
Sorry.
very comprehensive sharing, and I think we a bit running out of time also. I will request you please share this additional information on the what's in the chat box as you were saying, and you definitely bring a lot of interesting perspectives, and we yet to evolve this interagency practices on SFM, CFM in India, as well even from the civil society point of view also, and we will be in touch with you and other colleagues from Word for Program, that how we bring some of these good practices and take it forward. Maybe I quickly move to my other colleague, as you were also saying about closing the loop. So we have a practitioner, a very from a very field with a long experience of working into the field level projects, Ms. Mercy Satyavati. So, Mercy, what do you do with these feedbacks once it is received, and how you close this loop of communicating back with communities? Over to you, Mercy.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really happy to be part of this this event, and also being one in the panelist. So the question, rightly going to the question was, how do we deal with the feedbacks and how do we close the loop? So if we don't close the loop, there is no point of doing accountability. So when we get the feedback, so the accountability does not start with the feedback. The accountability starts, like there are 4 pillars for accountability. Now, providing information is the first and foremost. So when information is communicated to the people, when the people are aware of what is going to happen, definitely there will be much of less of problems, and it also reveals the transparency. Okay, the second one is consultation with the community. So consultation with the community, so in every other program we do, we consult with them. So we not only consult, we have series of meetings with the community people, uh, so that during the meetings itself, such a lot of questions they throw on us, and no, it is a two-way communication starts at the consultants level itself. So we provide information, we do the consultancy, then we also make them participate in also promote community participation. That is very important. community participation, like see, in case if there is any problem as such, if the community is actively with us promoting their participation, definitely when we close the loop also, when we come across some issues, the community will be with us. And the final part of accountability is only feedback and suggestion. So the question put forth, now I come to the feedback and suggestion. What do you do with the feedback received? How do you close the loop and the two-way communication with the community? So we get the feedback. We have a suggestion box in every other distribution sites, and every other program we have a suggestion box, and we collect the feedbacks from the community there. So there are people who are not able to write, so they can write in their vernacular language also. And people who are not able to write also take other people's help to write and put their feedbacks in the box. So when the feedback is collected, we will segregate the feedback according to their questions and comments. There will be a lot of thank you notes. Okay, the community is grateful, and the thank you note we need not further work on it. Whereas there will be few questions like they'll want to have one more kit, relief kit. When distribution of relief kit, they'll want to have one more kit. Then we had to before giving their feedback and suggestion, we also tell them, we teach them how to write the comments, we teach them how to give suggestions. So the community is with us right from the day one, like when we provide information, the consultancy, and their participation is also confirmed, so they are with us. So when the community is with us, we definitely have not much of problem at all. Maybe one or two challenges are there, but when the community is with us from stage one, we do not have much problems at all. So how do we close the loop? See, there are some questions we can answer them, and we can talk to them and answer those questions and cover. Say for one question, I would like to say that one we were not able to close because they wanted the people who are in rented house, they wanted one more kit for their householders. So we have to explain to them that the kit we give is not for the house. It is not for the house. It is for the people residing in that house. So if the house owner is not residing in that house, they are not eligible for the kit. They are staying in somewhere far off place where they are not affected by the floods. Whereas the house which they have rented out was affected by the flood, and they deserve to get the relief kit. So in that case, we had to meet one by one and tell them this is a confidential thing, because they have a fear that if the house owner comes to know that these people have told this to World Vision, then the house owner will ask the tenant to vacate the house. So then in that chit itself, in that paper itself, they'll put confidential. So then we are, if it is confidential, we insist them to give their phone numbers. So we call them and talk to them what it is. Then we had to say, please tell your owners or ask the owners to come and meet us. So that is now settled. So we cannot give for every tenant and every owners a kit we give. So that's one way of handling things. So I want to insist that when we have the community with us in every step, in everything, right? Even before we could write the proposal, we will talk to the community to find what was the exact need. So even before distribution, what is their exact need? So a lot of series of meeting with the community will help us to address their issue. There will be many a times during the Chennai floods we have seen people just come and give bed sheets and go. as if it's only the bedsheet they want. So we weren't like that. We had series of meeting. And one thing of World Vision, we do our relief work in the communities where we already work. So we know the community well, we know the leaders. So even selection of beneficiaries will be done together with the community people and community leaders.
Well,
There
thank
will
you
be
so
times
much,
that one.
Mercy. So sorry to interrupt you in between. I think it's a time factor now. So we do understand
Okay, Vikrant.
you take record of all the feedbacks and you take record of all the complaints, and that in confidentiality of that, we go back to the origin of the feedback or the complaint and inform them about the actions which have been taken on the feedback and the complaint to close the loop. That's one very good way. But I think also is a linked practices is there is that how we use the analysis of the feedback and the complaints, like what the Mir Bhai has been sharing with us, to better plan programs by the civil society and also at the government level, to improve our future programs. That's another way of what do we do with the feedback and the complaints. And also we look at different other channels of communicating it back to the communities also, so to retain their confidence in the mechanism and also in the programming. But as Mercy, you have also yourself bringing it out, and all at all stages, at all steps, we engage and community it up in a very participatory way. Thanks for that. I think with this, I'll come to the with Professor Santosh. I think who also brings a lot of experience with all these practices and from with all different types of stakeholders. So, sir, how you hearing all these things? What's your view? How can we scale up such interventions, and how we can institutionalize it into systems? And maybe if I will ask also is how can NIDM help us, to build more learning, capacity building, scaling or institutionalization of these practices? Over to you, Professor Santosh. Is Professor Santosh around?
Yeah, I think he got dropped out.
So, Michelle, in the meantime, you can just give him a call in case he's able to join back, and we can still have this discussion with him. In the meantime, I can also invite some questions from the participants. If anybody want to ask a question, they can raise hands. While we get some hands raised and Professor
Vikrant, I am already through and through, but your logistic person has muted me, so that I am not able to speak.
Sir, we can hear you. So shall I repeat the question for you?
No, I have heard it. I have heard it, but she did not allow me to speak. I was muted.
Okay. So you can go ahead now.
Okay, I don't have much point because I'm listening all and it's a challenging. First, fundamental question I would ask here to myself, as an ITM, you have posed this capacity development and all. The first thing I would like that this community is not a homogeneous one. It's a very heterogeneous, and the victims are the same way. Victims should not be taken only as the people who are distantly located, but also in the urban areas. So combining both, we should be. Then second, we should think of social stratification, that which society, which area and all. Third would be the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders about whom we are thinking of capacity development, where the accountability has to be done. So there are hundreds of stakeholders in responding to a disaster. So along with the government also have their own accountability system. They have their own capacity and all. They do that. But interestingly, every mechanism has a different. Player have a different kind of a mechanism for accountability. So first is to understand how that everyone has said how that can be collated, and if that is collated, that NITM and Sphere can think of developing a for accountability. In a digital technology world, when we are talking and how that can be incorporated in capacity development program, a large number to organize those who are humanitarian responders. Like we say in the government that we are accountable to the people of India, and that people of fixed, and that is the answerable to the parliament. But after that, we found many gaps in the accountability. So that RTI came and many things, also many other tools came. Then we have seen this Disaster Management Act. So these are the awareness that what are the things available people do not know. Disaster Management Act itself is a huge kind of a thing in empowering people for accountability. This to the people. So it's already 10 years since it came, or 15 years now, from 2005 to 2020. But we have not been able to disseminate because this act and policies to empower people. So that how that likely to be affected people could also be empowered, and that could be setting of a mechanism is much more important. How transparent we are. I'm telling you one thing. When we were drawing experience from Gujarat, where Mihir Bhai is there, and others also have worked in that. And that time when the housing was to be done and evaluation assessor was there in the field, and the people wanted to categorize their houses, and it was with the distribution of money and packages. That led to pilferage. So that pilferage means everybody wanted to their houses to be indicated as a totally damaged, fully damaged, so that they can have the maximum benefit out of the book. So similarly, and like if assessor is also doing an connivance with the community, they are also doing the same. That how we can. So these are the lessons. What I'm saying is what is happening and the pilferages while distribution of relief and where the money comes in, these things become much more prevalent. So issues are like that when we are distributing items, when we are distributing food, when we are distributing money. So Chennai flood is a classic example when we say that Chennai flood was also brought in terms of that fast distribution of cash in the transfer of money directly to the hands of the people. So mechanism, what I'm saying is capacity development is needed in terms of that what kind of a module are to be designed for the humanitarian responders, including government, civil society, and all the stakeholders. So that and the various World Food Program, I was listening to him also. He was bringing a lot of mechanism. Mihir Bhai brought a different mechanism. Shivani also brought such those kind of experiences. So Vikrant, I would suggest here that the need has emerged that accountability is an issue, and accountability is not happening even if the people have been empowered by the National Act of Disaster Management. Any disaster now you see, any disaster is happening, and a lot of RTI has been. Even COVID-19 has led to, I'm sure, must be thousands of RTI coming to the government floor. And so that because government is answerable and they're taking that. So what are the lessons which are coming to respond to those public grievances? Like in Gujarat, CM himself was attending video conferencing people who are grieved party. So whether that learning has gone to the other mechanism. So whether the time has come in an IDM engagement, I would suggest to develop a mechanism, and that mechanism should get translated to the lower level, to the local level government, and that is a kind of a permanent kind of a body, which I'm saying permanent mechanism, not a body, mechanism which has to be looked into. So this is very, very challenging what General Bindal said, and about this the kind of a continuum. It should not be a kind of a one-day approach. So maybe all the humanitarian agencies, you have brought a sphere standards. So what are the happening to a sphere standards when we are talking about putting that into a practice? So even the government or even the what I'm saying is the civil society organizations. Do we have any accountability to the standard which we have fixed? If not, then if they are blissfully ignorant, we have to inform them and educate them. So ourselves, the learning to ourselves also as a capacity development program, and also the humanitarian organizations, they have to be brought on the floor. So collating those kind of differential mechanism along with this the dividend we can draw from the technology, and that can be brought into the learning of the training programs and so on and so forth. So that capacity development is informing people, and so could be one is the information and training program on the sphere standards itself. Second program could be on the awareness about disaster management act itself. Third is that what is happening and what are the different mechanisms for accountability. That's collated and that should be disseminated. Fourth area could be a kind of a finance and goods and services. What are the goods and services? How this to be managed? How proper supply chain management could be brought in a very transparent manner? So there are plethora of areas which is coming as a challenge in terms of fixing accountability and building capacity. So of course, I fully agree that there is a need, and but how we are going to go as a kind of a the system of the government and system without the government, whether how that can gel together and synergize. That the institutions who are engaging, they have to come together, like World Food Program, ILO, and UNDP or UNDRR, have to be brought together for building accountability and building capacity for accountability. Even if you put any capacity, people will not be able to run that. So there's the challenge where an IDM can pitch in and can help along with AIDMI and other institutions. So I would this was my comments which I thought I would share in this. Thank you very much, Vikrant.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it's very aptly and a big commitment from your side, and we will also hold ourselves to be together in this journey with you. I think this is a series we are organizing on accountability to people, and our next session we will really like to learn the government mechanism also. I think the grievance redressal and how the act has been empowering the things which you are sharing. Our next session on accountability series will focus on that, and we will.
And Vikrant, for financial also, we have the audit system and everything is there. Every organization has that, but government has because it's a public institution, so they have this financial system and all. But where their things are not going in a proper direction, there we can think of how to improve those also. And the other players should also know what are the government systems and how they work.
Yes, sir. And I think third session probably we will have it on the financial tracking systems as well as the financial accounting, as you're suggesting. So through a series of these sessions on accountability, we will try to understand that what's the landscape in India, what's happening on it, what's required to be improved, and together, as some of the suggestions we have heard today, maybe we will bring our intelligence and a multi-stakeholder with a lot of government leadership into this, not to work in silos, a mechanism for India where we can truly hold, say, as collectively and individually as entities, hold ourselves accountable to the people we want to assist. I think we are really out of time there were some other interesting perspectives to hear from the distinguished panel we had it today with us. As I said, it's a series, it's not the end of it. Maybe we'll continue to engage with them and hear more from them in the future sessions. It's my time to put some of things as a forward action points from here. I already sum up, I think, with NIDM from the experiences we have shared today. The recommendation we come up today, we'll come together and put a report, and that report will feed into the next session of the series. And through a series of these sessions, definitely we'll see that what's our collective recommendation and what kind of a system we need to create, and we start working towards that. I express my sincere thanks to all the panelists today. Major General M.K. Bindal, Professor Santosh, Mrs. Das Shrestha, Shivani, Mercy, Mr. Fausto from World Food Program. Mihir Bhai, thanks everybody. Thanks for taking out your time and sharing your very useful perspectives today. That has been very helpful to us. I offer my sincere thanks to our partners, NIDM, WHO, UNICEF, World Food Program, Axel Foundation, and the thanks to the participants who have been very patiently hearing all the discussions and all. It's very encouraging to see your presence and also all the good work you're doing at the front end of this crisis. My thanks to all of you, and my thanks to my team who has put a lot of effort to organize it. I hand it back to my colleague Michelle for final logistics last announcements, and we close the discussion after that. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. So I would just like to make a few logistical announcements. Before we end the session, your certificates will be ready in 24 hours. Visit our website www.sphereindiacovid19academy.org, and you can download your certificates by scrolling down and finding the name for today's session. It will be ready to download in 24 hours. However, if you are unable to do so, as some participants face technical difficulties, please do not worry and email us at covid19academy@sphereindia.org.in, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So that's it from our side. Have a great evening and see you for our next session.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.